Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all doing well. And thank you so much for all the love on my last couple of videos. Welcome to all my new viewers. Anyways, while I'm working on some bigger projects, I just wanted to come on here and make a really quick video about one of the most fascinating aspects of some of my favorite games, and how this aspect is unique to gaming as a medium. One of the most fascinating things about video games as a medium is the element of mechanic. Obviously, when you're reading a book or watching a film, there's really kind of only one way to do that. Whereas when you're playing a game, each game is tailored around the actions that the game makers want you to take, whether that's a platformer or a puzzle or a visual novel. And if you've been playing games for a while, these elements are just kind of second nature at this point. You know that when you're playing a shooter, you're going to use one button to aim, one button to shoot. You know when you're playing an open world RPG, you're going to be looking on your map for new locations. Because of this, games have a unique opportunity to use those elements against you, to subvert them, and do what I'm calling here as a video game fake out. So I just wanted to go through a couple of my favorite examples in a variety of different types of games to see what mechanics they used and what they did to fake their players out, how it affected me when I played it for the first time. So a lot of these end up being pretty scary, or done in a way that's supposed to instill, fear in the player. But my first example is one that, more than anything, I just felt was really magical. And that's the glowing sea in Fallout 4. In every Fallout game, you're using your Pip-Boy to access a map of the general location you're going to be spending time in the game. And as, levels go on and the story goes on, you'll gain more markers that show locations to go to, or settlements, or, quest markers, or whatever. And Fallout 4 uses this in a really interesting way. On the map itself, we can see where the four corners of the map are. They're sort of sectioned off by this, dotted line around the edges. But when the protagonist is told to go to the glowing sea to continue their search for their son, we learn the glowing sea is off the map. And I just remember really distinctly the first time playing this, I got my power armor on, I got as much rad away and rad X as I can get, making sure that I'm going to be, prepared for this journey. And I'm quite a neurotic player of any game, so I'm constantly checking to see if I'm doing the right thing. And I remember just being confused. It's like, I'm supposed to go over here, but I can see where this map ends. And it was just really thrilling to sort of realize this, gigantic area is off the map. And it makes sense textually that the average wastelander isn't really going to try to spend any time in there. So of course, this is an area that they would, mark off the map. But for all of the flack that Fallout 4 gets, it really does instill you with a sense of adventure. And the fact that this is off the map makes you feel like you're truly delving into uncharted territory, at least the first time you go. Whereas in The Last of Us Part 2, my favorite fake out is a very small but very novel moment in relation to the rest of the game. There are workbenches that Ellie can find throughout the different locations in the game, and we can use, materials that we've collected along the way to upgrade weapons. When you're with Ellie on day 2 of her time in Seattle, you're on the way to a hospital, and one of the first, or maybe the first time that we've had Ellie just, by herself without, companion character tagging along. And so you can really feel the emptiness of the space, and end up in an apartment building where in one of the apartments there's a workbench. And so of course, like any other time that you see it, you just go up and you start working on your weapons. But this one time, no time before, and I'm pretty sure no time after, someone from the WLF attacks you. You hear very faintly and then very loudly, steps, somebody rushing up behind you, and like a scream, and then you're just straight up already in the middle of a fight with this guy. And I'm pretty sure that there's multiple WLF enemies there, and so you end up in this little skirmish, and it's like terrifying.
Jesus. What the fuck, people?
This is a game where, you're already kind of on edge the entire time you're playing, especially when you don't know what's going to happen. And it's a game that always wants you to be looking over your shoulder. And so once this happens for the first time, even though again, I'm pretty sure it never happens again, there's never going to be a single time that you walk up to a workbench that you're not thinking, I remember again, the first time playing it, when I would end up at a workbench again, I would try to make sure that my health was high enough that if, somebody ended up coming up behind me to attack me again, they weren't just going to like kill me in 3 seconds. And I just think that was a really clever idea and a great way to help you empathize with Ellie. Really step into her shoes and feel the feelings that you are never safe, no matter where you go, and you always need to be keeping an eye out on something. Now, the example I'm going to talk about next is the only one here that I think could technically work in another form of narrative media. It isn't playing with any gameplay mechanics, rather, again, sort of preying on our associations of how a piece of narrative media works. And this is the last chapter of Control. Control is a great game with so much insane stuff going on. And in the penultimate chapter, you get the ashtray maze, this, insane psychedelic masterpiece of a fight sequence. But when you get to the end of that chapter, some not great things happen to our protagonist. And then it cuts to the credits. And you're like, are you kidding me? This is how this fucking game ends? Like, I've spent all this time caring about Jesse, caring about the oldest house, and like, this is how you repay me? But as the credits go on, you start to notice some words are out of place, or some extra words have been added. And then it's not just words, but it's sentences. These extra words that are being added in, they're pretty similar to all of the things that the people taken over by the hiss have been chanting or saying in the background of the game. It always starts with like, I am the worm through time or whatever. And so as these credits go on, we get more and more of these sort of evil gibberish words. And the credits themselves literally start melting. They fucking melt. And it was like such an empowering feeling to watch this for the first time. Really, what they're faking you out with here is disappointment. Everything you've done in this game is for nothing. And they want you to feel that so that when the credits start to melt and you're transported back into the game in a dream sequence that you then have to get Jesse out of, it makes that chunk of gameplay so much more meaningful because you feel like you saw the end and you were able to rewind it. Or not that you did, but that, Jesse, the protagonist, did. And so then, of course, we end up getting a much more satisfying ending, and I'm pretty sure real credits. But in a world of, like, the endless Marvel end credit scenes that kind of don't really mean anything except to set, the next movie up or whatever, I thought this was a really ingenious way to play on, the audience's associations with endings and with credits. And the next two games I'm going to talk about end up functioning primarily through the use of these fake outs. While they were small but important elements of the other games that I mentioned, the idea of using mechanics of a game to subvert and fake and freak out the player is the point of these two. And the first one I want to talk about is the short horror game Anatomy, which itself is very simple in gameplay, but so terrifying in atmosphere. Basically, you're just sort of put into this house, and you need to collect cassette tapes of this person talking about the anatomy of a house and how it relates to the anatomy of a human body, and how leaving a house unkempt and abandoned does to it the same things that, desecrating a human body would. I've been really obsessed with urbex and abandoned houses and stuff recently, and I think this game has honestly really inspired me to sort of anthropomorphize abandoned houses when I see them now. You go through the game for a while and you do this, and I don't remember exactly when it happens, but the game crashes. And of course at first you're like, holy fuck, what's going on? But it crashes intentionally. When you go back into the game, you have to start the process over again. But you'll notice the house is a little different. It's starting to break down. But the interesting thing is it's not breaking down in the way that, a normal house in real life would. We don't see the floor decaying or mold or paint peeling off the walls or anything. It's breaking down like a game breaks down. The house itself is glitching. You get these big black slashes through things. Furniture is put in the wrong places. The rooms don't make sense anymore. And this process is repeated a couple of times where each time you go through, the game crashes and when you open it back up, it's worse and worse. I think it's so novel to use this idea of glitching in games to represent the idea of structural decay in real life. And again, this sort of hidden thesis I'm realizing I have here is that using these fake outs is a great way to garner empathy from the player. And I think seeing a digital environment decay digitally garners more empathy than seeing a digital environment decay naturally. And it's so much more terrifying, especially because you know this game has the power to crash itself. Obviously, I'm not really using it as an example of something that I love or think is amazing here, but some of this reminds me of like good old Sonic.exe, right? How fucking scary it is. This game knows your name, or it can see your files, or, you know, it has the power to do things on your computer that you aren't doing. And Anatomy strikes that same chord, those same fears, which again is sort of particularly meaningful in a story about an abandoned house. In a way, the digital form of a house for a lot of us is our computers. And to have this game that's now changing the way that your computer works in these moments relates very heavily to your house not being safe. The space that you spend your time in, that you decorate to be like yourself, that is something that isn't safe anymore, that's been usurped by darker, evil energy. I already admitted cringe with Sonic.exe, but you don't think that I was going to talk about games and talk about fake outs in games and not talk about Doki Doki Literature Club. Now, I haven't played Doki Doki Literature Club in like a million years. I'm excited to have to go back and do it again to get footage for this video, but this is another game that doesn't just have, you know, one fake out. The background of the game is built on consistently faking out the player, and that's because it knows that you know the form of the visual novel so well. And like, I feel like I need to just say I'm not a visual novel guy. Doki Doki Literature Club is literally the only visual novel I've ever played, but I understand the fundamental mechanics of pressing a spacebar a bunch of times and trying to woo generally egregiously misogynistic caricatures of women that would never be interested in you in real life. And some of the most clever are the ones way at the end with Monica. Again, mentioning Sonic.exe, you know, saying your fucking name. Monica does that as well, which can coincide with a sort of dual fake out that she'll only give you this one like scary face jump scare if you have a webcam on. Which again, is such an ingenious little thing to add because of course you're gonna have a million guys streaming shit like this, so let's add some extra thing to fuck up the streamers a little more. But I think the most impactful fake out in the entire game is the first one that we really get. After we've spent a really decent chunk of time getting to know these girls and, you know, going through the motions of talking to them and doing the poems and, you know, choosing which girl you really want to pursue and whatnot, we get the first really dark thing in the game, which is Sayori's suicide. And obviously that in and of itself is scary and shocking and sad, but what comes after is so much worse. It takes you back to the menu where, you know, where you normally saw pictures of all 4 girls. You see the other 3 girls and this kind of horrifying, glitchy mass where Sayori used to be sort of made out of the other 3. And when you go to play the game again, it starts over exactly the same way it did before, but instead of Sayori's name and her image, we get gibberish text and, again, like strobing mass of different, you know, body parts of these 3 other girls before everything sort of shuts down and starts over again, but this time you're alone. And I guess the thing I didn't mention is when you start the game the first time, you get this little blurb about how you and Sayori have like been best friends since childhood and you have to walk her to school every day. And that's why it's, I don't know, particularly stomach dropping when you start for the 3rd time and your character says, "Oh, I always walk to school alone and I have no friends," which I think is obviously, you know, the first clue that we're not just getting a story about suicidal anime girls, we're getting a story about suicidal video game characters. And it's not a fake out per se, but I do feel like I have to mention how clever the mechanic is to quote unquote beat the game. The fact that you're forced to go into the game files and delete the character file of Monica. I think Doki Doki Literature Club does a very good job of doing all this meta stuff without it being too much, too complex. You know, that's sort of a riddle that the average player could figure out, but that they're gonna feel really smart and fulfilled when they do figure out how to do that. But none of it would work the same way if that first fake out wasn't so effective. Okay, and just since a bunch of those were like sad and scary and stuff, I do want to give you a little bonus, kind of stupidly wholesome game fake out that comes from the fucking Sims. So in the Get to Work expansion pack for Sims 4, you have the active careers, right? And one of them is scientist. As you progress up in levels in your career, some of your tasks include going to this alien planet, you know, talking to aliens and gathering little specimens. Every day you're told at the start of the day what you're gonna do, and so when you go the first day that you've been promoted to the final level, it says, you know, oh, like you're supposed to go to 6 a.m., do a little trip, get some data, you know, whatever. But when you end up going through the portal to the alien world, it's actually a little surprise party. All the aliens are just really proud of you for being promoted to the top level in the scientist career. It kind of feels like the last day of school, like, you know, the last day, like, school party. You're just, like, hanging with your coworkers, getting a drink, you know. I just think this is one of the cutest little ideas ever, and they implement it so nicely. And so, yeah, just in a world where I feel like a lot of these fake outs are used successfully, but in areas where it's supposed to make you scared or sad or whatever, feel like you've lost your footing in the game. This is just a really fun example where it makes you feel happy and like loved and valued by your little sim scientific community, and I find that really sweet. And I know there are probably thousands of these that I'm missing, so I would be really interested to hear in the comments what your favorite example of a fake out like this is, and maybe I'll end up doing a part 2 at some point. I don't know. I don't really have any major conclusions about this sort of thing aside from the fact that I think it's awesome, and I think it's really cool that with the added technical elements of gaming, those can be used and be subverted in ways that are meaningful to the player, meaningful to our empathetic experience relating to the protagonist, and just fun and cool and weird in ways that traditional forms of media aren't really able to do. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. And again, I am so appreciative to everyone who in the last month or so has been watching and commenting and subscribing and supporting my stuff. I've been going at this for a couple years now, and I really appreciate hitting a little bit of a stride. So thank you all again. But I swear to God, my next couple of videos are going to be they're going to be long ones, they're going to be scripted ones, they're going to be real ones. I've had a couple of projects just on the back burner for 70 million years, and I'm really excited to get them out soon. So stay tuned, make sure you like and subscribe if you like this, and I'll see you next time.